Shana Tova. I know it seems a little bit out of season, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. The end of our Seder, and we have a number of different songs, and one of the most famous is Mi Yodea Echad. Who knows one? Who knows one? You know one. Great. What's one?
HaShanah.
Oh, great. And two? The tablets of the covenant. Three? The fathers, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Four? The matriarchs. Do you know the matriarchs? Who are they? Okay, we got them together as a group effort, team project. Five? Books of the Torah. Do you know those? Don't just say yes. Tell me. I've been a teacher too long. When you ask a student, do you know it, and they say yes, that means they don't know it, because otherwise they would tell you the content. All right, so we got the 5 books and 6. Orders of the Mishnah. Any takers? Okay, all right. We tapped out at Mishnah. I kind of expected we would finish that. I bet you can do 7 days of the week. But the orders of the Mishnah are probably going to throw you a little bit of a curveball. Although I will point out that there is quite a few episodes of my Mishnah class on YouTube. If you were not willing to come when we were doing it in person and original airings, you can catch the reruns of Mishnah anytime you like. But do you notice something rather sneaky that happens in that song? Right? Ostensibly, it's who knows one. And then eventually, under most versions, we end up at 13. Again, the variations are there, but usually the 13 principles of God. If you actually add up 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and all the way up through 13, you get a lot more than 13 individual things you're supposed to know. All right, it's sneaky. It's a little mnemonic device that if you're actually paying attention and thinking about each and every element of it, you end up knowing a whole lot more than just 13 discrete things. You end up with 13 factorial discrete things. Pretty cool. Only it feels like we didn't get all of the details, did we? We tapped out on that 6 orders of the Mishnah pretty fast, and that was only halfway there, and I make you bet we might have a little trouble with the 12 tribes as well. And maybe those 13 principles. Of course, you can always cheat by looking at Yigdal for the 13 principles, and the 12 tribes, at least one variation, is on the stained glass above me. It's kind of tricky to remember all of those details. But I put it to you that even if you were able to recite each of the details from who knows one all the way through, you still would not have scratched the surface. Because it suffers from the fatal flaw of all pamphlet religion, which is it tries to reduce something of infinite complexity to a simple mnemonic or a catechism of faith. And that just doesn't work well for Judaism. Don't get me wrong, after 4 cups of wine, it is a great song and an amazing end to our Seder. But as an actual teaching element, meh. I'm not so sure that I would put that in the lesson plan that I was trying to do, except to prepare them for being able to do it with their families for the Seder. But as a general framework, it's not so great, because let's go back to that first one. What is one? Good. What's God? One. Thank you for the tautology. Let x equal x. Beautiful. That's an excellent logical statement, but if you can't even answer what is God, then what are you doing with the tablets of the covenant? What are they? Why are we listing off the matriarchs and patriarchs? Who was Abraham? Who was Isaac? Who was Jacob and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah? And great, you can name the 5 books of the Torah, but do you know what they actually mean? What is in them? Why we continue to read them after 3,000 years? It's not enough to simply say, I know. It's not enough to simply recognize the structure or the text. It takes more depth. A bumper sticker will never work. A pamphlet will never work. It's fine as a reminder, but it's not so good for actually capturing the true depth. And when we miss the true depth, we are missing everything. Let me give you one more example. We are currently celebrating the holiday of Rosh HaShanah. Wonderful, right? We all know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here on a Wednesday morning. Or is it afternoon already? No, it's still morning. If your non-Jewish neighbor came up to you and said, oh, I hear that it's going to be your holiday soon. What is Rosh Hashanah? You would respond? The Jewish New Year. Absolutely. That is the stamp that we all use to respond to that question. Great. So now they think it's just like January 1st. Well, why wouldn't they? You told them it's Jewish New Year. You are using the New Year template as an explanatory device to someone who doesn't know anything about it, and you're just slapping the title Jewish in front of it as though that's going to do all the heavy lifting, explaining to them what our holiday is about. So they think that we're sitting in services with champagne? That we've got Dick Clark somewhere on live feed? What is Rosh Hashanah? Give me a deeper answer. What's that? The creation of the world. This is the birthday of the world. We say it in our tefillot, that it is the birthday of the world. What does that mean? Adam and Eve. Birthday of the world means we're going back to Adam and Eve. Although technically Rosh Hashanah is meant to commemorate after the 7 days, not the first of the 7 days. So, we go back to the beginning. Bereshit. It's at the beginning of that first book of the Torah that we were having a little trouble trying to work on Who Knows 5. So it goes back to the beginning. Great. So why are we celebrating that? Why celebrate the creation of the world? Right, do we celebrate when David became king? Do you know what day of the calendar that is? No, no one does. Do you celebrate any of the other major milestones that didn't happen to be turned into a holiday? You know, giving of the Torah is easy. We got Shavuot to help us remember that. Do you know what day we passed over into the land of Israel? There are some theories on that, but it's not quite so clear, and it's certainly not remembered, and it's definitely not celebrated as a holiday. Right, we don't remember everything, so when we choose to remember something and commemorate it with a holiday like Rosh Hashanah, it's probably pretty darn important to our conception of who we are and why we are here. The creation of the world matters to us, we think. But we haven't wanted to investigate it further than just knowing that we talk about it on Rosh Hashanah. We renew every year. That the creation of the world is a choice. That the creation of the world was an option that God chose to do, and that God continues to choose to do. That we celebrate the creation of the world because the world has continued, and, well, quite frankly, we need it to in order for us to, also continue. But to do so means that we have to also acknowledge that God is choosing each and every day and each and every year to make sure that this world continues. And up to us to modify how well it will continue, but the base existence, that's in God's hands. And we have to be grateful for that. We have to be in awe of that. And we have to recognize through the creation of this entire universe that God stands in a position not only as creator, but also as king. That God created us. And therefore God is in a position to command us, to give us mitzvot, to give us commandments. And therefore when we reflect on Rosh Hashanah, whether or not we have been living right, we know that we're not standing in front of some subjective measure, some yardstick that we got to pull out of thin air to decide what's right and wrong, but we are standing before a yardstick that was established as the universe was established and by the same power. And so therefore, our deeds can be measured. We can find out whether we were right or whether we are wrong, and this is the day that we do it most passionately. Obviously, we should be reflecting every day, but this day we set aside the time and that mental capacity and the passion within our heart to truly be critical of ourselves before our God, our Creator, our King. Avinu Malkeinu. It's not random that all of these words are lapped and worked together, and that the creation of the world and the judgment of the world stand together in our theology as well as our liturgy. And if you tell your non-Jewish neighbor that it's a Jewish New Year, they don't get that. They don't hear, this is the day I go and stand in front of the judge. They don't hear, this is the day when I reflect on my life. This is the day when I have my midlife crisis every year. This is the day when I acknowledge my mistakes. And I admit them not just in front of God, but to each other if it's another person that I've wronged. And I seek forgiveness from God and from each other. And that this is at the heart of what it makes a good community and a good society and, God willing, a good world. They only hear champagne corks unless you explain it a little more deeply. There is so much of our tradition that we know, but we don't know. Psychologists call it the illusion of explanatory depth. That we think we know, and we get about 1 or 2 sentences in, and we're doing fine. And as long as no one asks a follow-up question, we can walk away feeling great. But if I were to ask you, write a 5-page essay on what Rosh HaShanah is in Judaism, how many of you just got an icy chill down your spine? Not just because you're, a long time from writing essays for school, but you just realize, well, how many times can I say it's the new year to fill up 5 pages? It's a very special new year. It's the day we start the year. The year is started. It gets a little repetitive for 5 days. You're going to need a little more content, and yet we have filled libraries with the ideas of what Rosh Hashanah means to us, of all of its details. And we have to be prepared to investigate a little more deeply than our casual version. We have been trained by Twitter, or whatever it calls itself now, and by Facebook, and by TikTok, and by Instagram, to distill everything down to some, silly little song that has 13 stanzas of who knows this and that, and then we act like we have learned something. We base our politics, we base our geopolitics, we base our morality, our medical information, everything off things that can only be given in 30 seconds or more, because I'm not going to continue listening to you longer than those 30 seconds. And did you actually remember the start of the sentence by the time I got to the end? Because there weren't subtitles and I didn't have a catchy tune. And this is frustrating, because it means that we lose so much detail in the loss of resolution that comes from this type of learning, this type of sharing. And when we lose that, we often lose an understanding of why we are here. I mean, after all, if I have to pick between going to a New Year's party where there's going to be champagne and dancing and whether we're going to be sitting here doing something I don't understand, well, the champagne and dancing is certainly much more inviting, because I can understand that, even if I'm drunk. Whereas Rosh Hashanah does not work so well if you are smashed. Trust me on that, I'm sure. Don't test that. We need that depth. Let me give you one more example of things that are commonly said that we don't understand. Why was the first temple of Jerusalem destroyed? The first temple. Second temple, baseless hatred. We pretend like we understand that. We don't, but we pretend like we understand that. We've got that catchphrase down much more carefully in the 20th century because we saw a lot more baseless hatred, and so we could refer to it. First temple, though, why was it destroyed? Infighting. No, that's second temple. First temple, we had harmony in many ways, politically at least. The king was the king, and most people were more or less okay with that. And the prophets who actually said things are bad, they were the ones thrown in jail. The prophets who said everything is hunky-dory, they were the ones at the king's side. No problem, right? We were not politically divided during the first temple period. That was the second temple period, which is why it was destroyed. First temple, murder, licentiousness, and idolatry. Those are our 3. Murder, licentiousness, which is usually code in Jewish writings for things like adultery and incest, and idolatry. Okay. Like those had never happened before? We'd never had idolatry before the destruction of the first temple? It had been happening since we got the 10 Commandments. That whole golden calf thing, remember? We've been doing that since day one. All the way through the book of Joshua, we have people flirting with idolatry. All the way through the book of Judges, we have people flirting with idolatry. All the way through the book of Samuel and the book of Kings, people are embracing idolatry. Hundreds of years of idolatry. And now we get destroyed for it? And murder. We had no murder before the first temple was being destroyed? That all of a sudden people decided to start murdering for the first time ever in human history? No. Records, again, throughout the entire span of the Tanakh leading up to that, murder all the time. Tons of it. And need I say, the things that would push this into an R rating, we got lots of stories about those. They may not be the ones they told you in Hebrew school, because you weren't quite old enough to hear all of the details of the infidelity, the adultery, the attacks, and other assaults that were of that nature. But it is everywhere. Now, only in the First Temple period, now we destroy the temple because of that? No. Even if we can remember the First Temple was destroyed. Why was it destroyed? It was destroyed because of murder, licentiousness, idolatry. Even if we can recite that, like some vocab word in our 5th grade class, we don't understand why it actually happened, and we fail to understand what was meant to be done about it. The reason why those 3 were held up as the cause at that time, and why the prophets lambasted them for decades, for a century before the destruction, wasn't just that they were doing it, it was that they approved of it. It is one thing to sneak around and commit adultery, to have the decency, to be ashamed of it, to be disgusted by it, but do it anyway because your appetites got the better of you. That is understood. Judaism knows we make mistakes. That's why we're here for Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur, because we acknowledge that we're going to make mistakes and none of us are perfect. Even mistakes like that, people can make. But not to think it's perfectly fine. You don't get to define adultery as being okay just because you're doing it. You don't get to set that measure. Remember, there's a creator who set the benchmark, not you. And while we're talking about that, the wonderful thing about idolatry is that it gives you formal permission to give yourself permission to decide what is permitted. My God said that adultery is fine on this special holiday. Right? We can have the Canaanite orgy and it's okay. We can have cultic prostitutes and it's okay because my idol said so. Well, your idol said so? Well, I told you what my idol said because really it's me saying it, but like a ventriloquist dummy, my idol is going to tell you what I want to say through its mouth and then be mad at the idol, not me. I'm just following the idol's rules. Yeah, what that I said. And likewise murder. To kill somebody in a fit of passion, the Torah sees that, understands it, condemns it, has punishments for it. We know how to handle that. But to murder someone for a pair of sandals, as the prophets describe it, to take a life for no reason at all, other than greed or convenience, or even out of anger, but then to say, but it's fine because I didn't like him. No, that doesn't work. The temple was destroyed in that 586 catastrophe by the Babylonians, not because we were committing more crimes than usual, but because we no longer wanted to call them crimes, because we had decided the best way to improve our behavior was simply to say we were already behaving good. Problem solved. Now I'm not a bad person because I've redefined what bad is. And once that happened, once we had passed that liminal point, once we had left entirely the gravity well of our Creator, well, then there was nothing for it except to destroy and start again. To wipe it out and wait for the people who returned to return more wholeheartedly and to understand what they had done and rebuild. Not that there would never again be murder. Plenty of murders after the first temple was destroyed. Not that there wouldn't be any more adultery. It still goes on. Not that there wouldn't even be idol worship. Even to today, we have Jews who still engage in it, but nobody actually thinks this is all just fine, and at least collectively, we have not decided that's all fine. We've got other things that we collectively say are fine that are still a problem, but those three, well, we did kind of lick the main problem that was going on at that time. But if we had missed that, if we had been satisfied with, oh, it's all the murder, it's all the adultery, it's all the idolatry, and not understood the underlying currents that led to those being a systemic problem that was different in that generation than it was in the previous or the following generations, then we might have come up with some ridiculous solutions. Too much murder, we need more cops. That'll do it. Right? Too much murder. That's what we need. Harsher penalties. How do you get harsher penalty than death sentence for murder, which was already the penalty at the time? You cannot legislate your way out of that moral corruption. You can set an example from top to bottom of people who are willing to live a good life even when it inconveniences them, even when it means they can't indulge themselves, and even when it means they're going to be in trouble for things that they might have done. Yes, you can change society that way, but you can't change it by just putting more people on the street corner. Likewise for idolatry, likewise for adultery. The solution seems obvious unless you understand the deeper problem. And we've got to get to those deeper questions. Now, as it is the time of repentance and doing teshuvah, al chet, I have sinned before you, my community. You see, as I became a rabbi, it was always my passion to be able to distill elements of Judaism and try to bring them to the congregation in one form or another that would be self-contained. That I could teach on a Wednesday about a slice of Torah. Now, I always said to myself, I'm not going to be superficial like some people that I have seen teach Torah when I was much younger, but instead, I will go in depth. We'll pick 5, 6 psukim, verses, and then we will study the classical commentaries. We will bring Talmud to a forefront on these verses, and we will rigorously analyze them as long as the text doesn't go over front and back of one piece of paper, because then I'd have to photocopy 2 sheets, and then it'd be wasteful and all of it. So, and besides, it's always got to fit within an hour. It's not like we can carry the conversation over the next week, because next week is a new parasha. So, yeah, I erred. I have consistently tried to bring as deep of conversation as I can do with one piece of paper and 1 hour on a piece of Torah. And you know what? It's not good enough. I messed up. It's not sufficient. Likewise, the nutshells that I used to do so commonly before COVID, again, one piece of paper, about an hour-long discussion on some of the most complicated topics in all of Judaism. And perhaps you left when you studied those with me thinking you understood the topic, which was not my point. My point was to whet your appetite so you would go learn more. But sometimes that just doesn't work. Sometimes you have to highlight the fact that what you have currently learned is incomplete. Sometimes you have to prepare people for a follow-up class, for homework, for having to review. So this is my promise to you. Going forward in 5786, you can expect a lot more 2-parters, 3-parters. You can expect a lot more series of discussions rather than one topic at a time. I will no longer infantilize you by acting as some mummy bird, chewing up the worm and then spitting it into your mouth. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed feeding in many different ways, despite the grossness of that metaphor. But I have not been doing you enough credit. I've not been giving you enough of what you actually need, which is not just a slightly longer explanation to the questions that someone else might ask you or the question that you might have come in with, but to teach you to find new questions and new answers through persistent, extended investigation and thought. To wrestle with an idea for day after day, for week after week, to read different passages, maybe even a book on a topic, and wrestle with that idea more robustly than a 1-page handout or a 20-minute sermon. So that's the template going forward. And I know that you're hungry for more. I know you want to know more because I know that right now, within the world around us, people are hungry for more. They often turn to silly things like TikTok and Instagram and all of those other trite trivializations of what is a meaningful life. But the fact that those are popular show that people want more. Well, I'm never going to be a TikTok star, but I can be a teacher. And as a teacher, I can try to reach you in a way that doesn't put a limit on what you're looking for. That says, you know what? Let's leave this till next week. We'll continue this discussion. You know what? Here's a couple of articles or books you can read on this topic. Next week, we'll get together, we'll talk about them. The follow-up, the footnotes, this is where you will find more of the richness of Judaism that perhaps you feel has been missing. This is where you will find answers. Why did the righteous suffer? Why did God allow the world to be made the way it is? What do we mean when we say that we are an egalitarian community? How does that fit within Judaism? How do we wrestle with topics of abortion within our tradition? Yes, I've covered most of these topics at one point or another, but I've covered them in ways that were essentially superficial, meant to give you a basic understanding and grounding, but I have denied you the follow-up investigation and learning. So, 5786, if I'm doing teshuvah, I have to do something different and do something better. Expect more things to continue from one to the next week, from one session to another. Don't expect to be able to just pick it up, enjoy it for a few minutes, and put it down. You still can, don't get me wrong. If you want to come to session number 3 out of a 10-part series, come to session number 3 out of a 10-part series. You will still learn a lot and still enjoy the conversation, and maybe you'll come back for 4 and onward. But for those of you that are looking for more, who want a deeper understanding and who are hungry for this, send me your questions and ideas. Send me the topics you would like to spend more than just a 20-minute sermon exploring, or more than just a one-page handout trying to uncover. And I will do my best to give you what you deserve, which is access to the treasures of our people. They're there. It's what fills me with hope and gets me out of bed each morning. And I promise, I like to share. Shana Tova.